The creepiest places in the world. Gate to Hell, Turkmenistan. It's been burning for past 40 years, and no one knows when it's going to stop.
Lake Natron, Tanzania.
Due to high levels of salt contents, everything that touches the lake turns to pure stone.
This is the creepy story about the burger spot. There was a boy named Mikey who loved this local burger spot near his house. Every day he would go and get a burger and enjoyed it a lot. There was something about it that he loved, and no other burger tasted like it. One day after school, he went to the burger spot, and to Mikey's surprise, it was closed. This was the first time he had ever seen it closed. He was very disappointed and began the walk home. Later that night, he was watching TV, and on the news, they said they caught a serial killer in the area and was selling burgers and using the remains of his victims in his meat. When the news showed the burger spot, Mikey immediately puked. It was a burger spot that he went to every day, and this whole time, Mikey had been eating the meat of dead people.
Breaking news, they have now released the 911 dispatch for Matthew Perry. Take a listen.
Engine 23, Rescue 23, EMS 9. Engine 23, Rescue 23, EMS 9, all on radio. Respond to the drowning. Process search view drive.
Matthew Perry returned to his home this morning after a 2-hour round of pickleball. Shortly after returning home, he then sent his assistant on errands. When his assistant returned about 2 hours later, that is when he discovered Matthew unresponsive. Immediately, he called 911. Shortly after 7 p.m., multiple helicopters were above Matthew Perry's Los Angeles home. Shortly after, his mother and her husband, Keith Morrison, arrived on the scene. Sources say that his assistant located him in the jacuzzi at his home. Additionally, at this time, no foul play is suspected. Authorities say it appeared that he passed from an apparent drowning. At this time, they say an investigation into his passing is underway. I'll keep you guys updated. What do you think? Drop in the comments.
This man hugged his brother's killer, an act that sent shockwaves around the globe. Amber Geiger, a police officer, was found guilty of murder for shooting a man in his apartment. But in the middle of the court case, the man's brother did the unthinkable.
I can speak for myself. I forgive you. And I want the best for you. Because I know that's exactly what both of them would want you to do. And the best would be give your life to Christ.
And what he did next shocked everyone.
I don't know if this is possible, but can I give her a hug, please? Please?
Yes.
His actions were televised all over the world, and many people were inspired by the moment.
Officials in Italy are looking for this man who carved his and his girlfriend's name on the Roman Colosseum.
Serious, man?
Officials say this is the 4th time it's happened this year, and the latest person could face up to 5 years in prison and $15,000 in fines for defacing the almost 2,000-year-old historic site.
Don't let the smile fool you, because this is the same 12-year-old kid. This kid's name is Paul Henry Gingerich. He was a regular kid from Indiana, but he wanted to run away from home, along with his 15-year-old friend Colt. There was only one problem, and that was that Colt's father would be really angry at them for running away. So these kids decided that the only way they were going to be able to run away from home was if they gave Colt's father a few bullets, which they did, and he ended up dying. So those two kids, along with a third, were able to run away from home now. They got in a car and drove out west, thinking that all their problems had been solved. But they weren't old enough to drive, and it wasn't too long until a cop spotted them and stopped them. And that's when everything started to unfold. The two kids were arrested, and because Paul was the one who pulled the trigger, he became the youngest person to be tried as an adult at the age of 12, and they were sentenced to life in prison. They later appealed this ruling, and it went in their favor, and they were released, although they're going to be on probation for a very long time.
This medical mystery has turned into a murder mystery over the past couple of months. Because 32-year-old Betty Bowman goes to a hospital one morning for stomach distress and dehydration. Initially, doctors think she has food poisoning, but despite the treatment, her condition only worsens, with her suffering cardiac issues, fluid in her lungs, and organ failure, and then dying several days later. And as far as what killed her, Betty's husband, Connor, suggested to the medical staff that she had a rare life-threatening illness called HLH. And reportedly, that's also what he tells people was the cause of her death, even though the hospital test came back inconclusive. And then, as an autopsy is about to begin, Connor reportedly tries to stop it, saying that Betty's death was natural, that she didn't want to be a cadaver, and that she needs to be cremated immediately. So the medical examiner is like, this is sketchy. No, fuck off. And he performs the autopsy anyway. And surprise, surprise, they find that Betty actually died from the toxic effects of colchicine, a medicine used to treat gout. Or in other words, she was poisoned, which just happens to be this really incredible coincidence because her husband, Connor, just so happens to be a poison specialist. And guess what? How odd. 6 days before her hospitalization, Connor just so happened to reportedly research that same medicine. He also converted his wife's weight to kilograms and multiplied that by 0.8, which just so happens to calculate to the lethal dosage rate for colchicine, with him then also reportedly searching where to buy the drug online and search things like internet browsing history, can it be used in court, and delete Amazon data police. All to stay in the loop.
5 days ago, these two girls made a TikTok saying they found a dead body in the morning, but the thing is, they weren't lying. Two girls from Texas, age 17 and 16, made a Snapchat of them stealing jewelry off of the dead body of a man they found in a drainage ditch. In the video, Bethany Martin, the 17-year-old, took the necklace off of the man's corpse and gave it to her friend who was recording. The younger teen told police that she put the medallion on her own gold necklace because it matched her fashion style. Both girls have been charged with theft to a human corpse, and police believe the man's death was a suicide.
Former NBA players rotting in prison. Terrence Williams was a high NBA draft pick in 2009, but he wasn't that good and only lasted 4 years in the league. During that time, he made $7 million. In 2017, he started a scheme defrauding the NBA's healthcare program. He convinced at least 19 former NBA players to file claims for medical and dental procedures that never occurred, and he provided false invoices. He had a team of doctors that were in on the scam. Altogether, they filed nearly $4 million in false claims. The doctors received kickbacks for their roles in the scheme. Williams made $600,000 in kickbacks from the scheme. Things fell apart due to sloppy paperwork, grammatical errors, lack of professional letterhead, misspelled names of patients, and invoice numbers being reused led to an investigation and multiple arrests. Williams pled guilty to conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud, wire fraud, and aggravated identity theft, and in 2023, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison.
This is the spoon video, one of the hardest videos to watch explained. The video I'm about to explain is a pretty quick one, and it's about 27 seconds long. But just because it's short doesn't mean it's not disturbing. The video opens up with two guys sitting on the floor. The one has a white shirt and the other has a blue shirt. The victims have their hands tied behind their back, and one of the men then come up to the victim in the white shirt and begins to cut off every one of his fingers one by one with hedge clippers. The victim is taking it extremely well also, not screaming or making any noise whatsoever. You then begin to see a big puddle of blood behind the victim's back where his hands are. But the victim in the blue shirt is getting it far, far worse. And this is where it gets disturbing. At the start, you see the victim in the blue being held by one of the men by his hair, and you can see something has obviously been done to his eyes. Where his eyes are, it's completely covered in blood, and it actually looks like he's crying blood instead of tears, which makes this video even more unsettling. In the beginning of the video, you see the man drop a knife, so they might have stabbed the victim in the eyes first, and as the video goes on, you see the man get a spoon, and he then digs it into the victim's eye socket, trying to remove his eye. He starts with the victim's right eye, and he then digs the spoon in and pulls it out. You can see the eye of the victim wanting to pop out, but I don't know if it does come out because the quality is pretty bad. But one thing is for sure, this victim is never going to see again. After the man keeps digging the spoon into the victim's eyes, the video then concludes. But the worst part about this whole video is that they let these victims live. And who knows what else they did to these guys. Some sources even say that the cartel made them fight after the video. This is absolutely brutal, and can you imagine getting tortured and having your eyes ripped out? And that being the last thing you ever see in your life. He probably replays this whole situation in his head on repeat, and his PTSD has to be insane. Never go searching for this video because it's definitely one of the hardest watches, and luckily it's extremely hard to find.
If I didn't know this was a true crime case, I would think it was a disturbing horror film. On the morning of the 7th of October 2022, a barefoot woman was running around Excelsior Springs, Missouri, bashing on people's doors. Witnesses describe her looking like she came straight from a horror film and she was calling for help. She'd been beaten, held captive and SA'd for weeks. The woman was a shocking sight. She was covered in injuries and was wearing a bin bag. Disturbingly, she was gasping for breath as she had a very tight metal collar locked around her neck. It was a nurse who opened the door to her and let her come in. The nurse started to call police, and at this point the woman panicked. She warned her that the captor would kill her and claimed that he had killed her 2 friends. When police got there, the woman explained that a man called Timothy had captured her the month prior. He'd been holding her hostage this whole time. She said he'd been keeping her locked in the basement and had been SAing her. Disturbingly, she told police that he actually had a young son who lived at the house with him. When Timothy had taken his young son to school the one day, she used it as her opportunity to escape. Police made their way to the home of 39-year-old Timothy Haslett Jr. and found the property did in fact have a basement like the woman described. Timothy was arrested and is facing 9 charges including first-degree kidnapping. He's being held on a $3 million bond and faces 5 life sentences. Before his arrest, police were actually called to his address 3 times. Twice they were asked to do welfare checks, and this was from an employer and also family members. Police have searched his home with cadaver dogs and they haven't yet released what they know.
A massive search is underway for a father of 4 accused of killing his wife. On Sunday morning around 9 a.m., Breezy and Aaron Pennington's 4 kids showed up at their neighbor's house in Gardner, Massachusetts. At ages 2, 5, 7, and 9, they were reportedly scared because they couldn't find their father and their mother was crying in her bedroom. As we know, police were at the scene in 5 minutes, but tragically it was too late. They went upstairs and found that Breezy wasn't crying anymore. The 30-year-old was pronounced deceased from a gunshot wound to the face at 9:30 a.m. Now, as confirmed by surveillance footage, Aaron had actually left the house that morning at 8:50. And then on Monday night, his unoccupied BMW was found in the woods of a Boy Scout camp 4 miles away. In what is now a manhunt, police say they are searching all of 400 acres to find Aaron. And that he has a military background, spent the past 7 years in active service, and knows how to survive in these woods. Aside from that, court documents have revealed that Breezy had been saving up money to leave Aaron and move to Texas with their kids. Her sister says that on the outside he's a very nice person, but has been struggling with mental health issues that just kept getting worse. He also didn't have a license to carry a gun in Massachusetts, but Breezy reportedly kept one for her own safety. Today, the Penningtons' kids remain under custody of the state, with police asking anyone who sees Aaron to not approach him, but immediately call 911. Breezy was, quote, the funniest person. She had the best/worst dark humor. She loved true crime and, most importantly, her babies. She brought light to everyone that knew her, cheered for everyone, and made motherhood seem effortless.
This is the ISIS child executioner video, one of the most sickening videos ever explained. Before I begin, this is a massive trigger warning. The video begins with the victim tied to some sort of fence with his arms up. He is inside of a ball pit, and then you see a child walk across the abandoned ball pit. And I mean child, this kid is no more than 6 years old. Which is just mind-blowing. The child then stands next to an adult supervisor, and the adult then pulls out a pistol and cocks it and hands it to the child. The child then aims the gun at the victim's head and pulls the trigger, hitting him in the head. The first shot doesn't instantly kill the victim. You see blood leak out of his head and you see his eyes move around. The child then shoots the victim 3 to 4 more times, and at this point, the victim is dead. After this, the child raises the gun in the air and chants. The video then jumps to another execution, and it opens up with a young teenager holding up a knife. He then reads out a speech, and the video then skips to the execution, which is being done by the boy who just read the speech. The video briefly shows the victim. He has his hands tied behind his back and he's on his knees. The child executioner then kicks him on the back and he falls to the ground. The video then shows the toddler who did the prior shooting execution doing a cutthroat gesture. The teenage executioner then slits the throat of the victim, and as this is happening, there are various close-ups of the victim on the ground bleeding out and grimacing in pain. You can literally see the life leave his body, and like most ISIS executions, there is music playing over this. But you can briefly hear the victim making noises and the child slitting the throat. One thing I want to say is that these ISIS execution videos are shot in extremely high quality, unlike the Mexican cartel videos, which makes them very clear and disturbing. You almost have to remind yourself that it's real people because it literally is movie quality. This is by far the worst ISIS video out there, and not because of the gruesome nature, but because the killers are literally kids. The kid on the screen right now who did the shooting execution is literally a 6-year-old boy. I can't imagine the brainwashing these kids went through that ISIS done to them. And whatever you do, please never go searching for this video.
This is the only confirmed case of a child dying from poisoned Halloween candy. 8-year-old Timothy O'Brien went trick-or-treating with his family and neighbors on Halloween 1974. They approached a dark house and many of the kids felt no one was home. But Timothy's dad insisted on trying the door. After the kids gave up and left, his dad came back triumphantly holding several pixie sticks. Later that night before going to bed, Timothy started to eat his Halloween candy. But he had trouble getting the powdered sugar out of his pixie stick. So his father helped him loosen it up, and when Timothy complained that it was bitter, he gave him Kool-Aid to wash it down. Timothy quickly developed excruciating stomach pain and he ran to the bathroom where he started vomiting and convulsing. And less than an hour later, the 8-year-old boy was dead. Police immediately wanted to know what he'd ingested. Officers realized that the top 2 inches of the pixie stick was cyanide instead of flavored sugar. They also noticed that the packaging had been stapled instead of sealed shut. They did a sweep of the neighborhood to find out which houses were handing out pixie sticks, and oddly, none of them did. And they became extremely suspicious when Timothy's dad, Ronald Clark O'Brien, couldn't remember which house was handing it out, even though the group had only gone down a couple of streets since it was raining. And Ronald had a bit of a financial problem. He was $100K in debt, had defaulted on several loans, and the family's house had been foreclosed on. Yet, at the funeral for his dead child, he was bragging to his friends about using the life insurance money to go on vacation. Also, what 8-year-old has a life insurance policy? And the final strike against him was proof that he'd bought cyanide. Ronald was arrested and charged with the poisoning of his own son. And a frightening detail is that he passed the poisoned pixie sticks to several other children, including his own 5-year-old daughter. And miraculously, the poisoned candy was confiscated before it was eaten. Ronald Clark O'Brien was given the death penalty, and on the day of his execution, people stood outside and shouted, "Trick or treat!" Imagine killing your own child literally just for money. But to brighten the mood, I do want to include that shortly after his conviction, his wife remarried, and her new husband adopted their daughter. Let me know what you thought about this case in the comments.
This is One Guy, One Hammer, one of the most brutal execution videos from Brazil explained. The video that I'm about to explain is about 1 minute long and I don't recommend searching for it. The setting is in some sort of room with a white tiled floor, and where do we know that from? The video is shot in a POV style with the killer standing over the victim. The victim is lying on the ground with a pool of blood underneath his head and blood all around the room. There is also a lot of random stuff surrounding the victim, like clothes and bags of trash, I'm guessing. As the video plays, you see the full extent of the victim's injuries. He's still alive but appears to be in and out of consciousness, and his head is swollen and bloody from the blunt force trauma. His jaw looks completely broken and shattered, and his eyes are swollen shut. At the start of the video, you see the killer carrying a hammer in a POV style as he mocks the victim. He sounds extremely psychotic, and the victim then responds with a groan. After this, the killer strikes the victim in the face around the jaw area with the hammer. The killer then talks to the victim in a soft tone and continues to mock him. The poor victim then makes a snoring type of noise. The killer then strikes him in the jaw again to shut him up. The killer then hits him again and again and begins talking to him. He does this a couple times, making the victim's suffering even longer. At the end of the video, the killer goes complete full psycho mode and begins hitting the victim in the face over and over and over again. It's extremely brutal and very hard to watch. And as he is doing this, he's making a high-pitched squealing laugh which sounds like a witch. It's absolutely sickening, and after multiple hard strikes, he gets close to the victim and zooms in on his face. The victim's face is unrecognizable from the swelling and all of the blood caused by the hits from the hammer. The killer then talks to the victim in a soft tone, almost like you're talking to a dog or a child. From reports, the victim died from multiple hits to the head by the hammer, but other reports say he was stabbed off-screen, killing him. The sounds the victim makes in this video are absolutely stomach-turning, and you should never want to hear them. But what's even more disturbing is the psychotic nature of the killer. It was like he was playing a torturer in a horror movie, but it's real life. With real people, real blood, and real consequences. It's super disturbing and honestly just scary. Whatever you do, never go searching for this video.